When a school bus driver sees a little girl sprinting frantically toward his bus, he assumes she's just running late. But when she climbs aboard and reveals the chilling reason she ran, his face turns pale, and he knows he must act fast. Before we dive in, let us know where you're watching from. And if you believe in standing up for the vulnerable, be sure to like and subscribe for more. The chill of a frosty morning wrapped around the quiet suburban streets as Sam guided the yellow school bus through its usual route. The rhythmic hum of the engine filled the otherwise tranquil neighborhood, punctuated by the soft rustling of leaves in the breeze. Sam, a dependable man in his late 40s with a kind face and a streak of gray edging his dark hair, kept his focus on the road. Ahead it was a routine morning, or so it seemed as the bus rounded a curve. Movement in the side mirror caught Sam's attention. A small figure was sprinting down the street, her coat flapping behind her like wings. Sam squinted immediately, recognizing the girl as Delilah Carter, one of the quieter students on his route. Her desperate pace and frantic arm waving froze the routine rhythm of his thoughts, slowing the bus to a halt. Sam watched as Delilah reached the side of the vehicle, banging on the door with her tiny fists. Her cheeks were flushed to tears streaming freely down her face. Something was wrong, very wrong. Sam swung the door open, his voice calm but laced with concern. Delilah, what's going on? The 8-year-old stumbled up the steps, her breaths coming in jagged gasps. Her trembling hands clutched the straps of her oversized backpack, and her tear-filled eyes darted nervously back toward the modest house she'd come from. Please, she stammered, her voice shaking. Don't leave me, I need help. Sam quickly set the bus in park and stepped down to her level. Delilah, slow down, he said gently, his steady tone masking the unease rising in his chest. You're safe here, just tell me what's wrong. Dia's chest heaved as she struggled to find the words. I can't go back there, she whispered, her voice breaking. He said he'd hurt me if I told anyone. Sam's jaw tightened as a chill ran through him, her small frame quick rivered with fear, and the bruises on her wrists, barely visible under her coat's sleeves, didn't escape his notice. He knelt to meet her eyes, his weathered hands resting lightly on her shoulders. Delilah, listen to me, you're safe now. No one's going to hurt you while you're with me, but I need you to tell me who's trying to hurt you. Her lips quivered, and she shook her head, fresh tears streaming down her face. I can't, he'll know, I told. Sam's heart broke at her words, but he kept his voice steady. You did the right thing coming to me. You're not alone in this, okay? I promise. After a moment's hesitation, Delilah nodded. She wiped her nose on her sleeve and let Sam guide her to the front seat. Stay right here, he said softly. I need to make a call. Leaving the bus engine off, Sam grabbed his phone and called the school counselor. Miss Hall, the seasoned counselor, answered almost immediately, her tone growing serious as Sam explained the situation. Delilah's been on my radar for a while. Miss Hall admitted she's been withdrawn lately, but nothing pointed to this. I'll call Child Protective Services right now. In the meantime, don't leave her side. Understood, Sam replied, glancing at Delilah, who sat huddled in the front seat, her knees drawn to her chest. After completing the morning route, Sam parked the bus at the school. Miss Hall met him at the entrance, her expression grave. Together, they gently coaxed Delilah into her office, where the girl clung tightly to Sam's arm, refusing to let go. Please, don't make me go back, she whispered. Miss Hall knelt beside her, her voice soft but firm. Delilah, we're here to help you. You're so brave for speaking up. We just need to know a little more so we can keep you safe. But Delilah shook her head, silent tears spilling onto her cheeks. Sam crouched beside her again. You've already been brave, Delilah. You don't have to face this alone anymore. The sincerity in his voice seemed to reach her. She nodded hesitantly, but didn't loosen her grip on his sleeve. When the CPS case worker arrived, the atmosphere grew heavier. Delilah's fear reignited as the woman introduced herself. Delilah, I'm here to help you, she said gently. I'll take you to a safe place where no one can hurt you. No, Delilah cried, her arms wrapping around Sam's waist. Please don't make me go. I want to stay with you. Sam's throat tightened, but he knew he couldn't promise what wasn't his to give. He knelt and held her hands, his voice firm but kind. Delilah, I can't go with you, but I'll make sure you're safe. I'll be here, and I'll check on you, I promise. Her wide, tear-filled eyes searched his face for reassurance finally. She let go reluctantly, taking the case of workers' hand as they walked away. Delilah glanced back, her small face filled with fear and hope. The hum of fluorescent lights filled the small, neatly organized office. As Miss Hall, the school counselor, adjusted her glasses and glanced toward Sam and the CPS CASO worker Laura Jenkins, the gravity of the situation weighed heavily on all of them, but it was Miss Hall who broke the silence, her voice tinged with regret. "I should have seen it earlier," Miss Hall admitted, clasping her hands tightly. "Delilah has been so withdrawn these past few months. She comes in late, always tired, and sometimes her clothes seem unkempt. I noticed little things, scrapes, bruises, but she always had a quick excuse. I fell off my bike, or I tripped at the park I didn't want to jump to." Conclusions. Sam, seated nearby, his bus driver uniform slightly wrinkled after a long day, leaned forward. "You couldn't have known," he said gently. "Kids are good at hiding things when they're scared." Laura Jenkins, a woman in her late 40s, with a non-nonsense air about her, tapped her pen against a notepad. Her sharp eyes scanned the room as she spoke. "It's common in cases like this. The abuser instills fear, makes them think speaking up will only make things worse. That's why it's critical we handle this carefully." Sam glanced at Delilah, who sat in the corner of the office, her small hands clutching a warm cup of cocoa. She seemed lost in the oversized chair, her eyes darting between them like a cornered animal. Every now and then her gaze flitted to the door, as though she expected it to burst open at any moment. Laura approached Delilah with the practiced ease of someone used to navigating delicate situations. She crouched to the girl's level, her tone soft but deliberate. "Delilah, can you tell me about home? We're here to help you. No one will hurt you, I promise." Delilah shrank further into the chair, her fingers tightening around the cocoa cup. She stared at the floor, her lips pressed tightly together. "Delilah," Sam said, his voice steady but warm, "remember what you told me this morning, that you wanted help? We're all here to make sure you're safe." Her small frame shook slightly as she whispered, He said if I told anyone he'd find me." The room went silent. Laura exchanged a glance with Miss Hall, then jotted something down in her notebook. "Who?" Delilah. Laura pressed gently. "Your dad." Delilah didn't answer, but her trembling nod was enough. Laura straightened her professional mask, slipping just enough to reveal a flash of anger. "Okay," she said firmly. "Delilah, you won't be going back there tonight. We're going to find a safe place for you." "No," Delilah cried, her voice breaking. "He'll come for me," he said he would. Sam moved to her side, kneeling so that their eyes met. "Listen to me, Delilah, nobody's going to let that happen. Not Miss Hall, not Laura, and not me. Do you believe me?" Delilah hesitated, her wide eyes searching his face. Finally, she gave a small nod. Hours later, as the sun dipped below the horizon, Sam found himself driving through Delilah's neighborhood. The image of her tear-strewn face and trembling hands replayed in his mind like a broken record. Something about her fear felt deeper than the surface, as though it hinted at a darkness far worse than they had imagined. As he passed the Carter house, a modest two-story home with a neglected lawn, Sam spotted movement in the driveway. Squinting through the dim light, he recognized Todd Carter. The man's broad frame was hunched as he wrestled a heavy duffel bag into the trunk of his car. Even from a distance, Todd's agitated movements were obvious, his head darting around his shoulders. Tense, Sam slowed his vehicle and parked a discreet distance away, watching as Todd slammed the trunk shut and wiped his hands on his jeans. The man looked over his shoulder twice before heading back toward the house. The sight sent a chill down Sam's spine. His instincts, honed from years of working with people, told him something wasn't right, but he wasn't a cop. He couldn't barge in and demand answers. Instead, he pulled out his phone and dialed Detective Mike Anders, an old family friend. Mike picked up on the second ring. "Sam, what's up? I need your help," Sam said, his tone urgent. "It's about one of the kids on my route. Her name's Delilah Carter. She came to me this morning, terrified, saying her dad threatened her. CPS is involved now, but I just saw him loading a huge duffel bag into his car." He looked off. Mike's voice grew serious. "Did you see where he went?" "No, but he's back in the house now. I didn't want to approach him without backup." "Good call," Mike said, I'll run his name through the system, see if anything pops. If CPS is on this, they'll need anything we can dig up. Thanks, Mike. Sam said, I just want to make sure that little girl's safe. You did the right thing, Sam, Mike assured him. I'll keep you posted. The next day, Laura Jenkins arrived at the Carter home, her footsteps firm as she approached the front door. The Carter house sat in quiet defiance against the dimming twilight, its curtains drawn tightly, and its exterior freshly painted as though trying to present an image of perfection. Laura Jenkins, clipboard in hand, squared her shoulders as she approached the front steps. The earlier tension with Todd Carter lingered in her mind, sharpening her instincts as she prepared for another confrontation. This time, she resolved to dig deeper. Todd answered the door almost immediately. A strained smile stretched across his face. Can I help you? He asked, his tone hovering between forced politeness and thinly veiled irritation. Mr. Carter, I'm Laura Jenkins with Child Protective Services, she said, flashing her badge. I'm here to talk to you about Delilah, Laura replied evenly, stepping into the house without waiting for an invitation. Her practiced eye scanned the living room. It was immaculate, but the strong chemical smell of bleach hung in the air, sharp and unmistakable. Todd gestured toward the couch. I already spoke to the school. Delilah is fine. There's nothing to worry about, but please come in, make yourself at home. Laura ignored his attempt at charm, her focus instead on the details that didn't quite add up. The carpet looked freshly shampooed, its dampness faintly visible under the lamplight. On a side table, a pile of framed photos stood conspicuously tidy, as if hastily arranged. She picked up one of the frames. A picture of Todd, Delilah, and a woman she assumed was Sarah. That's my wife, Todd said, his voice tightening slightly. Well, ex-wife now. She left us about a year ago. It's been tough on Delilah. Delilah mentioned her mother earlier, Laura said, setting the frame down carefully. She seemed upset. Todd shrugged, leaning against the doorway. What kid wouldn't be? Sarah walked out on us without a second thought. I've been doing my best to hold things together, but you know how it is. Laura nodded, keeping her expression neutral. You said earlier that Delilah has been struggling. Can you elaborate? Todd's demeanor shifted, a flicker of annoyance crossing his face. She's 8 years old. She's bound to have some bad days. Kids fall, they get upset. They say things they don't mean, and the injuries. Laura pressed, her tone firm, but not confrontational. Accidents, Todd replied quickly. She's clumsy, always has been. Fell off her bike last week, scraped her knee. You know how kids are. Laura let the silence stretch, watching as Todd's discomfort grew. She glanced toward the kitchen, where the faint outline of a mop leaned against the counter, the bucket beside it filled with murky water. Her attention shifted to a door at the far end of the hallway. What's down there? She asked, motioning toward it. Todd stiffened. The basement, just storage, old furniture, tools, that sort of thing. Would you mind if I had a look? Laura asked, stepping toward the door. Todd moved quickly, blocking her path. There's nothing down there worth seeing, he said, his tone sharp now. Like I said, just storage. Laura took a step back, her instinct screaming that something was wrong. She made a mental note, but didn't push further. Forcing the issue would jeopardize her credibility and escalate the situation unnecessarily. Instead, she adjusted her approach. Understood, she said smoothly. Thank you for answering my questions. I'll be in touch. Todd's shoulders relaxed slightly, but his gaze remained wary as he opened the door for her to leave. Have a nice day, he replied, his voice hollow. Later that evening, Sam Porter sat across from Detective Mike Anders at a small diner on the edge of town. The coffee in front of him had gone cold, untouched, as Sam recounted everything he had seen and heard over the past 2 days. There's something wrong in that house, Mike, Sam said, his voice low but urgent. That girl didn't just make this up. Anders, a seasoned detective with a perpetually furrowed brow, leaned back in his chair. You're not the first person to raise concerns about Todd Carter, he admitted, tapping a pen against his notebook. 2 years ago, neighbors called in reports of shouting and banging. When officers showed up, Todd claimed it was an argument with his wife, and she backed him up. No charges were filed. Sam frowned. What about Delilah? Was she there? She was, but nothing pointed to her being in danger, at least not back then, Anders said. He flipped through his notes before adding, Todd also has a sealed record, an assault charge from his early 20s. He avoided jail by completing Anger management classes. Sam's jaw tightened. That doesn't sound like someone who should be raising a child alone. Anders, sigh, it's not enough to act on Sam. Suspicion doesn't hold up in court. Then what will Sam demanded? Are we waiting for something worse to happen? Anders raised a hand to calm him. We're not ignoring this, but we have to follow procedure. CPS is involved, and Laura Jenkins knows what she's doing. If there's enough evidence, we'll get a warrant. Sam leaned back, frustration etched on his face. I just don't want to see that girl slip through the cracks at her office. Laura typed up her report, the faint ache in her temples growing as she recounted the day's events. She detailed Todd's evasiveness, the lingering smell of bleach, and the locked basement door. Each detail painted a picture of a man with something to hide. She paused, staring at the blinking cursor on the screen. Her gut told her that Delilah's life depended on what came next. With a steadying breath, she finalized her report and sent it to her supervisor, including a formal request for a warrant to search the Carter home. Her phone buzzed with a notification, a message from a colleague. It was a brief update. Todd Carter has requested a meeting with CPS tomorrow to discuss Delilah's case. Laura's unease deepened. She had seen this tactic before, a calculated move by abusers to regain control of the narrative. She closed her laptop and leaned back in her chair, the weight of the case pressing heavily on her shoulders. After Laura filed her report, citing the suspicious circumstances surrounding her visit to the Carter home, Detective Anders reviewed her findings alongside the growing concerns about Todd's behavior, the unsettling evidence, a history of domestic disturbances, Sarah Carter's unexplained disappearance, and Delilah's cryptic comments prompted Anders to push for a search warrant by the following morning. The warrant was approved. Laura and Anders coordinated with the precinct, assembling a team to execute the search. The morning was heavy with tension as the police convoy pulled into the quiet street where the Carter home stood. Laura Jenkins stepped up out of her car, clutching her clipboard tightly. Detective Mike Anders was beside her, his expression hard with focus. Officers armed with the warrant and dressed for the operation moved briskly toward the house. Laura adjusted her jacket to the cool breeze biting at her skin. She took a deep breath, steeling herself, or what she suspected lay ahead. The previous night's unease had only grown after filing her report. Now, with the warrant approved, it was time to act. Todd Carter was already on the porch when the first officer knocked sharply on the door. His expression darkened as Laura and Anders approached. What the hell is this? Todd barked, crossing his arms as he blocked the doorway. His usually polished demeanor was gone, replaced by visible anger. We have a warrant to search the premises, Mr. Carter, Anders said, holding up the document. His tone was calm but firm. Todd snatched the paper, scanning it quickly before glaring at Laura. This is harassment. I've done nothing wrong. We're just following protocol, Laura said evenly. Please step aside so we can proceed. Todd hesitated, his jaw tightening, but eventually stepped back into the house. Fine, but don't think you'll find anything, because there's nothing to find. The house was as pristine as Laura had remembered, its meticulous order giving the settling impression of a stage set for appearances rather than a lived-in home. Officers moved efficiently, opening drawers, checking closets, and photographing every corner. The smell of bleach still lingered faintly in the air, a reminder of the hasty cleanup Laura had noted during her last visit. Todd trailed behind them, muttering under his breath, "You people are unbelievable. My daughter's been taken, and this is how you help." Laura ignored his complaints, her attention drawn to the basement door. An officer stood by, waiting for Anders' nod before unlocking it. Todd's protests grew louder. "You're wasting your time down there," he snapped, his voice rising. "It's just tools and junk." Anders shot him a pointed look. "Let us decide." That the basement was dimly lit, the single bulb casting long shadows across the room. Boxes and old furniture were stacked haphazardly, but it didn't take long for the officers to find the first red flag. A loose panel on the wall revealed a hidden compartment. Laura's stomach churned as an officer pulled out a small bundle of items wrapped in cloth. Unwrapping it, the officer revealed blood-stained rags, a broken child's bracelet, and several crumpled pieces of paper. Laura took a closer look at the papers, her breath catching as she realized they were drawings crudely Rendered but unmistakably disturbing dark figures loomed over a small child. In every sketch document, everything, Anders instructed, his voice tight. He turned to Laura, his expression grim. "This isn't looking good," Laura nodded, forcing herself to remain composed. "Let's keep going." Further into the basement, a locked closet drew their attention. Todd, who had followed them down, stepped forward, his agitation mounting. "You have no right to go through that," he said, his voice teetering on the edge of control. "We have every right." Anders shot back, motioning for the lock to be cut. Todd's protests grew louder as the closet was opened, revealing a duffel bag. Sitting ominously on a shelf inside the bag were items that made Laura's heart sink: Sarah Carter's driver's license, credit cards, and personal effects, including a tattered scarf Laura recognized from one of the photos displayed in the living room. Anders held up the items for Todd to see. "Care to explain why these are hidden in a bag in your basement?" Todd's face twisted in anger. "That's none of your business. Sarah left them behind when she ran off. She didn't care about this family. And now you're dragging her into this mess. You've been holding on to her things for over a year." "Hidden in a locked closet?" Laura asked, her tone sharp. Todd's gaze darted away, his jaw working. "Seriously, I didn't know they were down here. She must have left them when she moved her stuff." Before Laura could respond, the sound of footsteps echoed from above. Todd's lawyer, a sharp-suited man with an air of smug confidence, descended the stairs. "All right, that's enough," the lawyer said, his tone clipped. "This search is over." Anders stepped forward, unfazed. "We have a warrant, and we not finished." "You found what you're going to find," the lawyer countered, his voice cold. "Any further actions will be viewed as harassment, and I'll make sure my client's rights are protected." Anders stared him down for a long moment before nodding to his team. "Document everything and wrap it up back upstairs." Laura stood by the front door, her thoughts racing. Todd leaned against the wall, his arms crossed, and his face a mask of defiance. "You're making a huge mistake," he said, directing his glare at Laura. "You're ruining my life over lies." Laura met his gaze, her voice steady. "We'll let the evidence speak for itself." As she stepped outside, Anders joined her. "We got enough to escalate this case," he said quietly, "but we're going to need more to connect the dots, especially about Sarah." Laura nodded, her mind already piecing together a timeline. "Delilah's case is officially a criminal investigation now, and if Todd had anything to do with Sarah's disappearance, we'll find out." The two stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the case pressing heavily on their shoulders. Behind them, the Carter house loomed, its tidy facade belling the secrets it had tried to hide. "What do you think happened to Sarah? Did she really leave like Todd said? If so, why did she leave Delilah behind?" Share your thoughts below. And if you're eager to find out how the story unfolds, give this video a like and keep watching. The tension from the search warrant lingered like an unspoken weight on everyone involved. Detective Andrew sat at his desk, the soft hum of the precinct's overhead lights providing the only background noise. His focus narrowed on a single name that stood out from Laura Jenkins's follow-up report: Emily Mitchell. She had worked for the Carters as a nanny 2 years ago, but left abruptly. Anders leaned back in his chair, his gut telling him she might hold the key to understanding what happened behind the Carter family's polished facade. After making a few calls, he tracked her down to a modest apartment in a neighboring town. Anders pulled his unmarked car to the curb, glancing at Sam Porter in the passenger seat. "You sure you want to be here?" he asked. Sam nodded. "If this can help Delilah, I'll do whatever it takes." The pair climbed the narrow stairs to the second-floor unit. Emily's door opened cautiously after Anders knocked, the security chain still in place. A woman in her late 30s peered out, her eyes shadowed with worry. "Miss Mitchell, I'm Detective Anders," he began, holding up his badge. "This is Sam Porter. We're investigating Todd Carter and need your help." Emily hesitated, the chain rattling slightly as her grip tightened on the door. "I've got nothing to say about Todd Carter," she said curtly. "You should leave." Anders leaned closer, his voice lowering. "I understand you're scared, but Delilah needs you. She's safe now, but we need to know what you saw while you worked for the Carters. It could make all the difference." Emily's expression softened at the mention of Delilah. After a moment of silence, she unlatched the chain and opened the door wider. "Come in," she murmured, her voice Barely audible, the small living room was tidy but sparse, suggesting a life of quiet solitude. Emily perched on the edge of her couch, her hands wringing nervously. As she avoided eye contact, "I left that job for a reason," she began, her voice brittle. "Todd, he's not the man people think he is." Andrew pulled out his notepad, nodding encouragingly. "Take your time." Emily hesitated before continuing. "It started after Sarah left. He changed. His temp was always short, but after she was gone, it got worse. Delilah bore the brunt of it." Her voice cracked. "He humiliated her, yelling at her in front of me, calling her worthless and a burden." Sam, sitting across from her, clenched his fists but said nothing. Emily's hands fidgeted in her lap. There were times I'd hear Delilah crying in her room, begging to be let out. He'd lock her in there for hours, sometimes overnight, as punishment. When I confronted him, he told me to mind my business, or I'd regret it. Andrew's pen paused mid-note. "What about Sarah? Did you hear anything before she disappeared?" Emily's expression grew guarded. "They fought a lot. She wanted to leave, but he wouldn't let her. The last argument I overheard was bad. He was yelling, calling her selfish for trying to take Delilah away. The next week, she was gone. Todd said she'd left to find herself, but it didn't feel right." As Andrew and Sam wrapped up their interview, Emily's face darkened with worry. "You can't let Todd know I talked to you," she said. "He has a way of making people regret crossing him." "You're protected," Anders assured her, "but your testimony could be crucial. Will you consider coming forward?" Emily hesitated, then nodded reluctantly. "If it helps Delilah, I'll do it, but I need anonymity. I can't risk him finding me outside." Sam exhaled sharply as they returned to the car. Hearing her describe what Delilah went through, "It's worse than I imagined." Anders nodded grimly. "We're building a strong case, but Todd's the type to fight dirty. He won't go down easily." Later that evening, as Sam finished his route at the bus depot, his co-workers called him over. "Hey Sam, there's a guy outside asking for you," one of them said, stepping out into the dimly lit lot. Sam found Todd Carter leaning against his car, his arms crossed, and his expression dark. "You've been sticking your nose where it doesn't belong," Todd said, his voice low and menacing. Sam squared his shoulders. "If protecting Delilah means doing the right thing, then yeah, I'll keep sticking my nose in." Todd's face twisted into a sneer. "You don't know anything about my family. You think you're some kind of hero. You're nothing but a bus driver." Sam's jaw tightened, but he kept his composure. "Delilah deserves better than whatever you're putting her through." Todd stepped closer, his tone turning icy. "You keep pushing, and you'll find out just how wrong you are." As Todd drove away, Sam stood rooted to the spot, his heart pounding. The encounter left him shaken, but his resolve hardened. Todd was unraveling, and Sam was determined to see justice served. Sam Porter sat in the break room of the bus depot, his untouched coffee cooling in his hands. The chatter of co-workers faded into the background as his mind replayed Delilah's trembling voice on that fateful morning. The thought of her with a foster family brought some relief, but it didn't erase his growing worry. His phone buzzed, breaking his rye. It was Laura Jenkins, the CPS case worker. "Sam, I thought you'd like an update on Delilah," she said, her voice steady yet cautious. "Is she okay?" Sam asked immediately. "She's adjusting," Laura replied. "The foster mother says she's still quiet, but she started to open up. She mentioned something significant, a fear her father drilled into her. He told her to never talk about the night Mommy disappeared." Sam gripped the phone tighter. "That poor kid, she's been through hell." Laura's tone softened. "She trusts you, Sam." That morning on the bus, it was the first time she felt safe enough to reach out. "That means something." Sam swallowed the lump in his throat. "Thanks for letting me know. Keep me updated." As he ended the call, determination replaced the worry in his eyes. He couldn't let Todd's manipulations overshadow the truth, but Todd wasn't backing down. By midweek, local news outlets were airing segments featuring him on camera, his carefully constructed persona of a grieving father in full display. "They tore my family apart," Todd said to the reporter, his tone laced with indignation. "CPS acted on baseless claims, and now my little girl is in the hands of strangers. And that bus driver, he's been harassing us for weeks. This is personal for him, not about justice." Sam watched the broadcast in disbelief, sitting in his living room. He clenched his jaw as Todd's fabricated narrative Played out on the screen, the reporter leaned in, their tone sympathetic. "What do you hope to accomplish, Mr. Carter?" "I just want my daughter back," Todd said, his voice breaking. "And I want these people to answer for what they've done to my family." The segment ended, and Sam slammed the remote onto the coffee table. The smear campaign was working. He'd already received calls from concerned parents, questioning his involvement in the case. The accusations stung, but they also fueled his resolve. Todd might control the narrative for now, but Sam had faith. The truth would eventually come out. The next morning, Emily Mitchell arrived at the precinct for her deposition, her determined expression masking the nerves beneath. Detective Anders met her in the hallway, offering a reassuring nod. "You ready for this?" Anders asked. Emily nodded, gripping her file tightly. "As ready as I'll ever be." In the interrogation room, Emily recounted her time working as the Carter family's nanny, her voice steady as she detailed Todd's escalating anger. Todd would yell at Delilah, calling her names and blaming her for everything. After Sarah left, he locked her in a room for hours, sometimes overnight. Anders leaned forward. "What about Sarah? Did you ever witness anything involving her directly?" Emily hesitated, then nodded. "I heard them fighting more than once. One time, Sarah screamed, 'You're going to kill us,' during a particularly bad argument. I reported it, but Todd convinced the responding officers it was just a misunderstanding. That was only days before she disappeared." Emily's voice faltered slightly as she continued. "Todd's behavior wasn't just anger, it was control. He wanted everyone in that house to feel music powerless." Todd's attorney wasted no time attacking the credibility of the case against his client. During the preliminary hearing, he targeted Emily Mitchell's testimony. "My client is the victim of an unwarranted investigation," the lawyer proclaimed, his voice sharp and calculated. "Miss Mitchell's claims are unsubstantiated based on personal grievances from her time as a disgruntled employee." Detective Anders sat in the gallery, his jaw tight, as he listened to the defense attempt to dismantle the case. Emily Mitchell sat nearby, her posture stiff, her hands clasped tightly in her lap, though visibly shaken. Her resolve remained firm as the defense's accusations loomed over her. "And what of Cape's involvement?" The attorney continued, his tone dripping with disdain. "Miss Jenkins acted recklessly, removing Delilah Carter based on speculation and subjective interpretations rather than hard evidence." Anders leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. "They're doing everything they can to paint Todd as a victim. We need something irrefutable." He glanced toward Emily, silently willing her to hold steady against the pressure. The courtroom buzzed softly with murmurs as the attorney pressed on, his confidence apparent. Anders clenched his fists, determination burning in his chest. "Let them twist the narrative for now. The truth will come out." Back at her foster placement, Delilah sat at the kitchen table with her foster mother, a kind woman named Cla. The room was warm and inviting, the scent of cookies wafting through the air. Claire gently encouraged Delilah to talk, her voice soothing. "You don't have to tell me everything," Claire said, "but if something's bothering you, I'm here to listen." Delilah fidgeted with the edge of her sleeve. After a long pause, she looked up, her voice barely audible. "He said I'd go away too if I told." Claire's heart sank, but she kept her tone calm. "Who said that, sweetheart?" "Your dad." Delilah nodded, her small hands trembling. "He got so mad that night. He and Mommy were yelling. Then he told me to go to my room and not come out." Claire placed a comforting hand over Delilah's. "You're so brave for sharing this, Delilah. You don't have to be scared anymore." With Laura's testimony and Delilah's statement, the detectives gained significant leverage. Later that evening, Todd sat alone in his dimly lit living room, nursing a drink. The mask of control he'd worn for so long was beginning to crumble. The court's insistence on pressing the case rattled him, and he couldn't shake the growing sense that the walls were closing in. Paranoia churned with his simmering anger, making him increasingly reckless. Detective Anders leaned against the hood of his car, the early morning light casting long shadows across the driveway of this Carter home. The warrant in his hand felt heavier than it should have, not because of its physical weight, but because of what it represented: a final opportunity to uncover the truth. Anders glanced at the team of officers and forensic analysts assembling behind him. "We're not leaving until we have something definitive," he said firmly, his voice cutting through the cold air. The front door creaked open. As Todd Carter, visibly agitated, stepped outside, his jaw clenched. His lawyer, a slick-suited man with a calm veneer, followed closely behind this. His harassment, Todd barked, his eyes darting between Anders and the officers. "You've already torn my home apart once." Anders approached Todd, holding up the warrant. "We have every legal right to be here." Mr. Carter, step aside. Todd's lawyer raised the hand, his tone measured but sharp. "Anything found today will be subject to scrutiny. Don't think for a second we won't fight this." Anders ignored the comment, motioning for the team to begin as the officers entered. The atmosphere inside the house was eerily still, the pristine rooms almost too perfect. Anders noted the faint scent of cleaning products lingering in the air, a detail that only heightened his suspicion. The team moved methodically, revisiting every corner of the house. Forensic analyst Lisa Grant paused at the basement entrance, her sharp eyes catching a slight discoloration in the edge of the carpet. "Detective, over here," she called out. Anders descended the steps, joining Lisa as she carefully lifted the corner of the newly installed carpet. Beneath it, faint brownish stains marred the concrete floor. "Get a sample," Anders ordered, his stomach tightening. Hours later, Lisa approached him with a grim expression. "It's blood. Preliminary analysis suggests it's old, but DNA confirmation will take time." Anders nodded, his expression